My ex told everyone I was crazy and unstable, so I let his new girlfriend discover the truth about him the hard way. When Marcus broke up with me after 3 years, he didn't just leave. He launched a full character assassination campaign that would make a seasoned political operative jealous. Suddenly, overnight, I transformed from his loving girlfriend into the psycho ex who couldn't handle rejection, the unstable one who made up wild, fabricated stories about his concerning behavior, the crazy girl who couldn't be trusted around sharp objects, social media, or mutual friends without supervision. Our entire social circle started avoiding me like I had contracted some sort of contagious mental illness that might spread through casual conversation. My coworkers began giving me weird, pitying looks after he visited my office to check on my mental state and subtly suggest to my boss that I might need professional help and possibly extended time off for psychiatric treatment. Even my elderly landlord called me one evening, his voice filled with genuine concern, asking if I needed resources for emotional support because a deeply concerned gentleman had reached out about my well-being and ability to maintain stable housing. The most infuriating part was how believable Marcus made it all sound. He had this way of tilting his head slightly when he spoke about me, his voice taking on this tone of sincere worry mixed with resignation, like he was a saint who had tried everything possible to help his troubled ex-girlfriend, but sadly, some people just couldn't be saved from their own destructive tendencies. Marcus was a master manipulator with the polished charm of a seasoned politician, and the calculating, strategic nature of a chess grandmaster planning moves 17 steps ahead. Successful, devastatingly handsome in that generic business magazine way, and convincingly sincere when he needed to be. He painted himself as the deeply concerned ex-boyfriend who just wanted his former girlfriend to get the professional help she desperately needed, while systematically destroying every relationship and support system I had built over the years. Looking back now, I can see how methodically he had isolated me during our relationship. It started small, casual comments about how my friends seemed jealous of our happiness, or how my family didn't really understand our connection. He'd suggest we skip social gatherings because he wanted to spend quality time together, just the two of us. He'd offer to pick me up from work so we could grab dinner, which meant I stopped getting drinks with colleagues. Slowly, gradually, my world became smaller until it revolved entirely around him. When I tried to rebuild those connections after our breakup, I discovered he had already laid the groundwork for my isolation. He'd been having concerned conversations with my friends for months, subtly planting seeds about my emotional instability and concerning behavior. He told them I'd been struggling with anxiety and depression, that I sometimes lashed out irrationally, that he was worried about my mental health but didn't know how to help. My best friend, Sarah, was the first to reveal the extent of his manipulation. 3 weeks after our breakup, she finally admitted that Marcus had been calling her regularly, expressing worry about my increasing paranoia and asking if she'd noticed any alarming changes in my behavior. He'd even suggested that my accusations about his controlling tendencies were a symptom of my deteriorating mental state. I thought he was just being caring, Sarah said, her voice thick with guilt. He seemed so genuinely worried about you, and you had been more withdrawn lately. Of course I had been withdrawn. Marcus had been systematically undermining my confidence and isolating me from everyone I cared about. But he was skilled enough to make it look like natural relationship evolution, and smart enough to start building his alternative narrative before I even realized what was happening. He told everyone I'd become obsessed with him after our breakup, that I'd been sending him threatening messages at all hours of the night, showing up at his workplace unannounced, and spreading malicious lies about their relationship because I couldn't accept that he'd moved on to someone better. None of it was true, but Marcus had always been extraordinarily persuasive, and people naturally wanted to believe the successful, charming businessman over the allegedly unstable woman. The genius of his approach was how he never directly said I was lying or crazy. Instead, he'd furrow his brow with concern and say things like, "I'm really worried about Emma. She's been struggling since our breakup, and I think she might be having trouble distinguishing between her feelings and reality right now." It sounded so much more credible than calling me a liar outright. 2 months after our breakup, just as I was starting to rebuild my social connections and regain some semblance of emotional equilibrium, he was dating Sophia, a sweet, naive marketing coordinator from his company, 24 years old, fresh out of college with stars in her eyes, and that particular combination of ambition and insecurity that made her perfect prey for someone like Marcus. She was everything I had been 3 years earlier: young, impressionable, eager to please, and completely unprepared for the sophisticated manipulation techniques of a man who had been perfecting his craft for years. She had long blonde hair that she wore in a sleek ponytail, bright blue eyes that lit up whenever she talked about her future, and the kind of optimistic outlook that comes from never having experienced real betrayal. I watched from a careful distance as he love-bombed her exactly the way he'd done with me in the beginning. The expensive flowers delivered to her office with romantic notes that made her colleagues swoon with envy. Surprise vacation bookings to exclusive resorts in Napa Valley and Big Sur. Public declarations of love on social media with carefully curated photos that made their relationship look like a fairy tale. The whole nauseating performance that I'd fallen for completely 3 years earlier when I was young and stupid enough to believe it was genuine affection rather than calculated manipulation. Marcus had a formula, and he followed it religiously. First came the overwhelming attention and affection, what psychologists call love bombing. He'd text constantly throughout the day, send flowers for no reason, plan elaborate surprise dates, and make grand romantic gestures that felt like something out of a movie. He'd tell you that you were different from every other woman he'd ever met, that he'd never felt a connection like this before, that he could see a future together. Then came the gradual isolation. He'd express concern about friends who seemed negative or unsupportive of your relationship. He'd suggest spending weekends together instead of going out with your usual social group. He'd offer to drive you places so you wouldn't have to take public transportation or ask friends for rides. Slowly, your world would shrink until he was at the center of everything. The control came next, disguised as care and concern. He'd want to know where you were going, who you'd be with, what time you'd be home. He'd call it wanting to make sure you were safe, or missing you so much he couldn't bear not knowing when he'd see you again. He'd frame possessiveness as devotion and jealousy as proof of how much he loved you. Finally came the psychological manipulation. He'd undermine your confidence with subtle criticisms disguised as helpful suggestions. He'd gaslight you when you questioned his behavior, making you feel like you were being irrational or overly sensitive. He'd collect information about your insecurities and vulnerabilities, then use them against you whenever you tried to assert independence. I had lived through the entire cycle, and now I was watching him restart it with fresh prey. When Sophia started following me on Instagram, I knew Marcus had told her about his problematic ex-girlfriend. Her direct message confirmed everything I'd suspected about the narrative he was spinning. Hey, I hope this isn't weird, but Marcus mentioned you might need someone to talk to. I've been through toxic relationships too, and I know how hard it can be to move on and heal from emotional trauma. If you ever want to grab coffee and chat about moving forward in a healthy way, I'm here. The message was so perfectly crafted to make me seem pathetic and broken that I had to admire Marcus's skill. He'd positioned himself as the concerned ex who cared enough to ask his new girlfriend to reach out to his troubled former partner. It made him look compassionate and mature while painting me as someone who needed intervention from strangers. But it also gave me the opening I'd been waiting for. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I crafted my response carefully, striking just the right tone of grateful vulnerability, mixed with lingering affection for Marcus. I suggested we meet at the small coffee shop 3 blocks from Marcus's apartment, the same place he'd taken me for our first official date 3 years ago, back when I still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. Sophia arrived 15 minutes early, looking nervous but determined to help the poor, unstable woman her wonderful boyfriend was so concerned about. She wore a soft pink sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in that same sleek ponytail, and she kept checking her phone like she was expecting Marcus to text her encouragement for this charitable mission. Marcus really cares about you, she said earnestly after we'd ordered our drinks, stirring her vanilla latte with the intensity of someone trying to solve world hunger. He talks about you sometimes when he's feeling reflective. He's genuinely worried you're not getting the professional help you need to process the breakup in a healthy way and move forward with your life. I smiled sadly, channeling every acting class I'd ever taken in college and drawing on genuine emotions from the darkest period of my life. He's always been so thoughtful about other people's well-being, such a caring soul. It's one of the things I loved most about him. Tell me, has he given you a key to his place yet? Her face lit up like Christmas morning, and I could see the pride and excitement she felt at reaching this relationship milestone. Actually, yes. Just last week. It felt like such a huge step forward in our relationship. He said he'd never given anyone a key that quickly before, but he trusts me completely and wants me to feel like his home is my home too. That's wonderful, Sophia. I'm so happy for you both. You seem like such a sweet person, and Marcus deserves someone who appreciates him. I'm sure he told you about his home security system? The cameras? She looked confused, her smile faltering slightly as uncertainty crept into her expression. Cameras? What cameras? He never mentioned any kind of security system. Oh, I paused, looking genuinely concerned and slightly uncomfortable, like I'd accidentally revealed something I shouldn't have. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. I don't want to cause problems between you two, especially when you're so happy together and building something beautiful. What cameras? She pressed, leaning forward with growing anxiety and setting down her latte with a slightly trembling hand. I pulled out my phone with apparent reluctance, opening a carefully organized folder I'd never shown anyone else. The screenshots were damning, but I presented them like someone sharing painful evidence rather than springing a trap. Marcus likes to document things. For his protection, he always said. He told me it was because he'd had problems with previous girlfriends making false accusations after breakups, and he wanted to protect himself legally. Her eyes widened as she saw the screenshots I'd taken during our relationship. Timestamps from hidden cameras positioned throughout his apartment, running 24 hours a day. Bedroom, bathroom, living room, kitchen, even the hallway. All recording continuously without the knowledge or consent of anyone who entered his space. This can't be real, she whispered, her hands starting to shake as the implications began to sink in. I found them during our second year together. Tiny cameras hidden everywhere you could imagine. When I confronted him about it, he said I was being paranoid and irrational, that I was imagining things and making up stories because I was jealous and insecure about his past relationships. He made me feel like I was losing my mind. I showed her more evidence. Photos of the microscopic cameras hidden in picture frames, air fresheners, decorative objects, even the smoke detector above his bed, all purchased under Marcus's credit cards, which I'd meticulously documented before he made me return his spare card and accused me of potential financial misconduct. He's been recording you since day one, I said gently, watching her face go pale as understanding dawned. Check your keyring carefully. Is there a small black device attached that you thought was just decorative? Sophia fumbled with her keys with trembling fingers, her face going ashen as she found the tiny recording device attached to her keychain, disguised as a cute little charm he'd given her during their second week of dating, telling her it was a symbol of how much she meant to him. Oh my God, she breathed, staring at the device like it might explode in her hands. There's more, I continued carefully, watching her emotional state and moderating my revelations accordingly. Has he asked you a lot of personal questions about your past relationships? Your family problems? Things you're ashamed of or embarrassed about? She nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes like a horrible sunrise. He keeps detailed files on everyone, comprehensive notes about vulnerabilities, fears, emotional triggers, things he can use for leverage later if needed. When I tried to leave him the first time, he threatened to tell my boss about my father's gambling addiction and my family's financial problems, intimate details I'd shared with him in confidence during vulnerable moments. I showed her pictures I'd secretly taken of the filing cabinet in his home office during one of the few times he'd left me alone in his apartment. Folders meticulously labeled with women's names, including mine and several others I didn't recognize. Each folder was thick with handwritten notes, printed emails, screenshots of private conversations, and personal information that could only have been gathered through systematic surveillance and manipulation. He's done this before, I said quietly, letting the weight of that statement settle. I wasn't his first victim, and you won't be his last. There's a whole system to how he operates refined over years of practice. Sophia was crying now, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of his manipulation and violation became clear. I told all my friends you were making up stories about him. I defended him to my family when they said he seemed controlling and possessive. I called you crazy behind your back and felt sorry for him for having to deal with a psychotic ex-girlfriend. It's not your fault, I said firmly, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. He's a professional at this. He's had years to perfect his technique, and he's incredibly good at making his victims feel complicit in their own manipulation. The coffee shop was getting busier around us, but our conversation existed in its own bubble of horror and revelation. I could see Sophia processing everything, connecting dots that had been invisible to her just an hour earlier. We need to document everything, she said suddenly, wiping her eyes and straightening her shoulders. If he's doing this to me and he did it to you, he's probably doing it to other women too. Do you have access to his laptop? I asked. She nodded grimly. He gave me the password last week, said he wanted complete transparency between us and that trust was the foundation of any healthy relationship. We drove to Marcus's apartment in her car, my stomach churning with familiar anxiety as we approached the building that had once felt like home, but now represented 3 years of systematic violation and control. He was at his monthly golf game, a standing appointment every Saturday from 2 to 6 p.m. with his business associates, during which he networked and conducted informal business while maintaining his image as a successful, well-connected professional. I knew his schedule better than my own after 3 years of planning my life around his routines and availability. Saturday golf, Wednesday evening squash league, Friday drinks with colleagues, Sunday morning gym sessions. He was predictable in his self-care and social obligations, which made planning this intervention much easier. Using Sophia's key, we entered the apartment that had once been my second home. Everything looked exactly the same. The expensive furniture we'd picked out together during weekend shopping trips, the artwork I'd helped him choose from local galleries, the kitchen where I'd cooked elaborate dinners for his friends and business associates. But now Sophia could see what I'd tried desperately to tell people for months. The cameras were everywhere, and once you knew what to look for, they were impossible to miss. Sophia found his laptop on the desk in his home office, while I located the external hard drives hidden behind books on his shelf. Terabytes of storage containing years of recordings, meticulously organized by date and woman's name. The violation was staggering in its scope and calculation. Jesus Christ, Sophia whispered, staring at the laptop screen with a mixture of horror and fascination. There are hundreds of videos of me sleeping, showering, changing clothes, having private phone conversations with my family. He's been watching everything. Check the folder labeled insurance, I suggested, my own stomach turning as memories of my own discovery flooded back. She clicked, and we found audio recordings of private conversations spanning months, Sophia crying to him about her mother's mental health issues and her fears of inherited depression, me discussing my anxieties about job security and my father's drinking problem, other women sharing intimate details of childhood trauma, sexual assault, and family dysfunction. Each recording was labeled with clinical precision, dates, times, emotional states, vulnerabilities revealed. It was like a psychological dossier designed to weaponize our most private moments against us. He's been building blackmail material on all of us, I said, feeling sick all over again. Emotional leverage to use if we ever tried to leave or expose him. Sophia was crying harder now, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of his manipulation became clear. I told all my friends you were making up stories about him. I defended him to my family when they said something seemed off about our relationship. I called you a psychotic ex-girlfriend behind your back and felt sorry for him for having to deal with your alleged harassment. Please don't blame yourself, I said firmly. This is exactly what he does. He turns his victims into accomplices by making them participate in discrediting previous victims. It's part of his system. We methodically copied everything onto multiple secure drives, working in tense silence as we documented years of systematic violation. But I had one more revelation that would ensure Marcus never manipulated another woman again. Sophia, I need to show you something else, but it's going to be really difficult to see. Check his browser history under private browsing. She navigated to his supposedly deleted browsing data, which wasn't actually deleted, just hidden in a folder innocuously marked Tax Documents 2019-2023. What we found made both of us physically ill. Marcus wasn't just recording women without consent for his own gratification or control. He was selling the content on private forums and specialized websites. Hundreds of videos of intimate moments, labeled with our real names, ages, physical descriptions, and personal information. Shower videos, bedroom footage, private conversations, all packaged and sold to strangers on the internet for profit. He's been profiting off our privacy, I said, feeling nauseated even though I'd suspected this for months after noticing unexplained income deposits in bank statements he'd carelessly left visible. We've been his product this entire time. The financial records showed thousands of dollars in payments from various adult websites and private collectors who specialized in voyeuristic content. He'd been running a sophisticated exploitation operation, using his charm and manipulation skills to recruit unwitting victims who became content producers without their knowledge or consent. Sophia stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair and causing the laptop to slide dangerously close to the edge of the desk. I'm calling the police right now. This is criminal. Wait, I said, grabbing her arm gently but firmly. Let's be strategic about this. We need to document everything properly first, or he'll find a way to destroy the evidence and discredit us both. Over the next 3 hours, we systematically photographed and copied every piece of evidence we could find. Screenshots of his video collections, financial records showing his profits from selling our private content, email correspondence with buyers and website administrators, and detailed spreadsheets tracking his victims and earnings. But the most damning evidence was his personal database, a comprehensive spreadsheet tracking which women had discovered his behavior and how he'd successfully discredited them. My name was at the top of the neutralized threats list, with detailed notes about his successful character assassination campaign and reputation destruction protocol. The notes were chillingly clinical. Subject responded to isolation tactics as expected. Social network successfully poisoned against her. Reputation damage sufficient to prevent credible accusations. No further action required. Other women were listed under active management, including Sophia, with specific strategies for keeping them compliant, isolated from support systems, and emotionally dependent. Sophia's entry included notes about her insecurities regarding her mother's mental health and her desperate desire to prove she could maintain a stable relationship. There were also women listed under future targets, with notes about their vulnerabilities and the best approaches for recruitment. Some I recognized from his workplace and social circles. Young, attractive women in subordinate positions who would be flattered by attention from a successful older man. We copied everything and left the apartment before Marcus returned from golf, making sure to reset everything exactly as we'd found it, so he wouldn't suspect what we'd discovered. That Monday morning, Sophia and I walked into the police station together, armed with multiple flash drives full of evidence and a detailed timeline of Marcus's criminal behavior spanning several years. We filed reports for voyeurism, invasion of privacy, distribution of intimate images without consent, stalking, and computer fraud. The detective assigned to our case was Detective Maria Gonzalez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor who'd clearly seen this type of case before and understood the complexity of proving systematic psychological manipulation. How many other victims do you think there are? She asked, reviewing our evidence with an increasingly grim expression. At least 12 based on his files, I replied, but probably more who haven't been cataloged yet or who managed to escape before he added them to his database. Detective Gonzalez nodded grimly. We'll need to contact every woman mentioned in his records. This is going to be a complex case that might take months to fully investigate. Within a week, investigators had contacted every woman mentioned in Marcus's files. 8 others came forward with similar stories of manipulation, secret recording, and systematic discrediting when they tried to speak out or end their relationships. The pattern was always the same: intensive love bombing followed by gradual isolation from support systems, collection of compromising material and personal vulnerabilities, increasing control and psychological manipulation, and vicious retaliation against anyone who tried to leave or expose him. Marcus was arrested at his office on a Thursday morning, led away in handcuffs in front of his colleagues and clients. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the prominent businessman charged with multiple counts of voyeurism and exploitation. His company immediately suspended him pending investigation, and several business deals fell through as partners distanced themselves from the scandal. Local news picked up the story after court documents became public, and suddenly the narrative shifted completely. Everyone who had believed his lies about me was calling to apologize, but the damage to my career and relationships had already been done. Some trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. The best part was watching Marcus try to rebuild his image while facing multiple felony charges. His expensive lawyer held press conferences claiming his client was the victim of a vindictive ex-girlfriend orchestrating an elaborate revenge scheme, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the number of victims made conspiracy claims increasingly absurd. His lawyer initially suggested a plea deal, admission of guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence and avoiding the publicity of a trial. Marcus refused indignantly, convinced he could charm his way out of consequences like he always had. His narcissism wouldn't allow him to admit wrongdoing or accept that his victims had outsmarted him. The trial lasted 3 weeks and was covered extensively by local media. 12 women testified about his pattern of manipulation, recording, and retaliation. The evidence was overwhelming. Hours of video footage, detailed financial records, comprehensive documentation of his methods and victims. Marcus's defense strategy was to claim all relationships were consensual and that recording in his own home was legal. His lawyer tried to paint us as bitter ex-girlfriends seeking revenge and attention, suggesting we had conspired together to frame an innocent man. But the evidence of secret recording, financial exploitation, and systematic manipulation was impossible to explain away. The prosecutor methodically presented Marcus's own documentation of his crimes, his spreadsheets tracking victims, his financial records showing profits from exploitation, his detailed notes about manipulation strategies. It was like he had provided a comprehensive instruction manual for prosecuting himself. Marcus was convicted on 14 counts of voyeurism, 3 counts of distribution of intimate images without consent, 2 counts of stalking, and 1 count of computer fraud. He received 8 years in prison and was required to register as a sex offender upon release. His civil cases are still ongoing. 9 women, including me, filed lawsuits for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and lost wages due to his retaliation campaign. Our lawyer says the settlements will likely reach 7 figures total, especially since Marcus had been profiting from our exploitation and had significant assets to liquidate. More importantly, Marcus can never do this to another woman again. The conviction ensures he'll be monitored after release, his reputation is permanently destroyed, and any future romantic partners can easily discover his history through sex offender registries. Sophia and I became unlikely friends through this process. She quit her job and moved across the country for a fresh start, but we stay in touch regularly. The experience bonded us in a way that transcended the awful circumstances of how we met. She's in therapy working through the trauma, but she's stronger than she gives herself credit for. Last month, she sent me a photo from her new apartment with her boyfriend, a genuinely kind man who asked permission before posting a couple photo on social media and respects her boundaries completely. He thinks I'm wonderful exactly as I am, she texted. No documentation required. The criminal justice system doesn't always work for women like us. Too often, charismatic manipulators escape consequences while their victims are discredited and silenced. But sometimes when we support each other instead of competing, we can expose the truth and protect future victims. Marcus spent 3 years convincing people I was crazy and unstable. He nearly destroyed my career, my relationships, and my mental health with his calculated lies and systematic manipulation. Now he's the one behind bars, and I'm thriving in ways I never thought possible. Truth has a way of surfacing eventually. Sometimes it just needs the right person to help dig it up. And sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone else discover what you already knew. The most satisfying part wasn't seeing Marcus get arrested or convicted. It was watching Sophia transform from a naive victim into a fierce advocate for other women. She now volunteers with organizations that help survivors of intimate partner surveillance and speaks publicly about recognizing manipulation tactics. We turned our victimization into power, and that's something Marcus can never take away from us. My grandmother's will reading was supposed to be private, but the lawyer accidentally sent me the real version first. I was 23, sitting in my cramped studio apartment eating ramen for the 4th night straight, when the email arrived from Whitmore & Associates. The subject line read, "Confidential, estate documents for Vivian Blackwood." Grandma Vivian had died 3 weeks earlier. Cancer, they said. Quick and peaceful. I'd been her favorite grandchild, the only one who visited her every Sunday, who listened to her stories about the old country, who didn't roll my eyes when she talked about family curses and blood debts. While my cousins called her crazy behind her back, I genuinely enjoyed our conversations. She'd make tea in her antique china cups and tell me about our ancestors, about old traditions, about things that went bump in the night. "The world is stranger than people want to believe, Delilah," she'd always say, her weathered hands wrapped around her teacup. "Our family has seen things, done things, that would make normal folks run screaming." I'd always assumed she was just eccentric. Old people got like that sometimes, mixing reality with imagination. But now, staring at my laptop screen in my tiny apartment with its peeling wallpaper and broken heating, I was beginning to understand that maybe Grandma hadn't been as crazy as everyone thought. I opened the attachment expecting the usual legal jargon about her modest savings and the old Victorian house she'd left me. The house had been in our family for generations, and everyone assumed it would go to me since I was the only grandchild who actually visited. My mother had been dropping hints for months about how I could finally move out of this dump and have a real home. Instead, I found something that made my blood freeze. Final will and testament, actual version, do not send to family. My hands shook as I scrolled down. The first page looked normal enough. Standard legal language about being of sound mind and body, revoking all previous wills, the usual stuff. Then I reached the section titled, Special Bequests and Confessions. To my granddaughter Delilah Rose Blackwood, I leave not only my house at 1247 Morning Street, but also the responsibility of maintaining our family's most sacred duty. In the basement, behind the false wall marked with the raven symbol, you'll find them. 7 urns, 7 souls, 7 debts that must be paid monthly for as long as our bloodline exists. My laptop screen blurred as tears I didn't realize I was crying clouded my vision. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Maybe one of my cousins had hacked into the lawyer's system as some twisted prank. Lysander had always been jealous that Grandma favored me, but I kept reading, unable to stop myself. Each month, on the new moon, you must feed them. 1 cup of blood from the living, 1 lock of hair from the willing, 1 tear from the grieving. The ritual must be performed in the basement chamber at exactly midnight. If you fail even once, they will be released, and our family line will suffer for 7 generations. This is why your grandfather never came home from the war. He was the keeper before me, and when he left for overseas, I was too young to take over. The binding weakened. This is why your uncle died in that car accident when he was only 19. This is why your mother can't have children after you, despite trying for 20 years. The room spun around me. I had to grip the edges of my desk to keep from falling off my chair. My mother had never told me she'd been trying to have more children. I'd always assumed I was an only child by choice, not by some supernatural curse. I kept reading, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. The lawyer has been instructed to give you a sanitized version that mentions only the house and modest savings. He doesn't know about the basement. He doesn't know about the responsibility I'm passing to you. But you need to know the truth before the fake reading tomorrow. You need to understand what you're inheriting. The document continued with details that made my skin crawl. Feeding times, always at midnight on the new moon. Specific incantations that had to be spoken in what looked like Latin mixed with something much older. Instructions on how to recognize if the containment was weakening. What to do if one of the souls escaped. And photographs. Dozens of Polaroids of 7 ancient urns, each carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Each urn had a nameplate beneath it in the photos. Matthias the Strangler, died 1823. Elena the Poisoner, died 1834. Willem the Drowner, died 1841. And 4 others whose names were harder to read in the dim lighting of the photos. Below each photo was a handwritten description of their crimes and how they'd died. Matthias had killed 12 children in a London workhouse before being hanged. Elena had poisoned 3 husbands and a dozen rivals before drinking her own concoctions. Willem had drowned entire families by sabotaging their boats, claiming their souls for some dark master. These 7 souls were bound to our family in 1847 by your great-great-grandmother Cordelia Blackwood. She made a pact with an entity that dwells in the marsh behind our property. Her husband was dying of consumption, her children were starving, and winter was killing everything. The entity offered her a bargain, prosperity and protection for her bloodline in exchange for eternal service as guardians of these 7 murderers' souls. I had to stop reading to run to the bathroom and throw up. When I came back, wiping my mouth with a shaky hand, I forced myself to continue. Cordelia agreed. The entity gave her these 7 souls, murder victims from the old country, bound to urns made from their own bones. As long as someone from our family feeds them monthly and keeps them contained, our line would be blessed with good fortune, wealth, health, protection from harm, success in all endeavors. But if the ritual is ever broken, if the souls are released, they will hunt down every living descendant and drag them back to serve the entity in the marsh forever. I have been the keeper for 43 years since I was 22 years old. My mother did it for 37 years before me. Her grandmother did it for 29 years before her. The house ages you, Delilah. The constant proximity to those trapped souls drains the life from you slowly. This is why I look older than my years. This is why I never traveled, never remarried after your grandfather disappeared. This is why every keeper in our family has died before age 60. My phone rang, making me jump so hard I nearly threw the laptop across the room. The caller ID showed my mother's number. Delilah? Her voice sounded strained, worried. I just got the strangest call from that lawyer. He said there was some confusion about Grandma's will and wanted to confirm your address for tomorrow's reading. Did you receive anything early by mistake? I stared at the laptop screen, at the words that were rewriting my entire understanding of my family, our history, my future. No, I lied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Nothing yet. Good. I was worried there might be some clerical error. You know how these old lawyers can be with technology. She paused. Are you okay, honey? You sound strange. Just tired. Long day at work. Well, get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be emotional enough without you being exhausted. After she hung up, I returned to the document. The next section was labeled Instructions for the New Keeper and contained detailed diagrams of the basement layout, the ritual chamber, the feeding ceremony. There were warnings about never trying to communicate with the souls, never attempting to open the urns, never staying away from the house for more than 6 days. If you leave for longer than a week, the entity will begin calling you back. The compulsion starts as a gentle pull, a homesickness you can't shake. By day 5, it becomes physical pain. By day 6, you'll be in agony. By day 7, you'll either return willingly or the entity will drag you back itself. The final section was a personal letter addressed directly to me. My dearest Delilah, if you're reading this, then my time as keeper has ended and yours must begin. I know this seems impossible, terrifying, insane. I felt the same way when my mother left me this burden at age 25. I raged against it, denied it, tried to run from it 3 separate times. The entity brought me back each time, and the punishment grew worse. The first time I tried to leave, I made it to Chicago before the pain became unbearable. I came back after 4 days thinking I could just visit the house briefly and then leave again. But once you accept the role of keeper, the house doesn't let go easily. The second time, I tried to bring your grandfather with me. We packed everything and drove to California, thinking distance would break whatever hold the house had on me. We lasted 6 days before I collapsed. Your grandfather carried me back, and that's when the entity marked him. 2 weeks later, he was drafted. He never came home from overseas. The third time, I tried to destroy everything. I brought gasoline and matches to the basement, determined to burn the whole place down and end the cycle forever. But when I reached for the first urn, something happened. I saw what would happen if I succeeded. I saw our entire family line. You, your mother, your cousins, everyone, dying in horrible accidents within the year. The entity showed me exactly how each death would occur. So I put down the matches and accepted my fate. You have 3 choices, and each one comes with consequences. First, you can burn this will, pretend you never saw it, and attend tomorrow's fake reading. You'll walk away with nothing, but you'll also walk away free. The sanitized will only mentions a small inheritance and some personal effects. Eventually, someone else in the family will discover the truth when the protection starts failing and strange things begin happening. It might be your mother, your cousin Lysander, or some future grandchild born decades from now. But it won't be you. You can live a normal life, have a family, travel the world, do whatever you want. The price is that someone else will eventually pay for your freedom. Second, you can try to break the binding entirely. I've researched this option for decades. It requires destroying all 7 urns simultaneously, while performing a specific counter ritual during a total solar eclipse. The next eclipse visible from our location won't occur for 37 years in 2062. If you succeed, our family will be free forever. But if you fail, if even one urn remains intact, every person with Blackwood blood will die within a year. Every single one. The entity will make sure of it. Third, you can accept the responsibility and become the new keeper. The house will provide for you. You'll never want for money, food, or shelter. The family blessing will continue. Protection from harm, success in endeavors, good health for everyone except yourself. But you'll also never truly be free. As I mentioned, the longest any keeper has lived away from the house is 6 days. After that, the entity starts calling you back with increasing force. I chose the third option because I was young and afraid, and couldn't bear the thought of condemning my entire family. I've regretted it every day since, but I've also protected everyone I love for 4 decades. Your cousin Lysander graduated from Harvard Medical School. Your mother has lived a long, healthy life despite her fertility struggles being supernaturally imposed. You've been safe, successful, and happy your entire life because of the protection the entity provides. The choice is yours, but know that if you accept, there are strict rules that cannot be broken. Never let anyone else enter the basement chamber. The souls will try to possess them. Never miss a feeding. Even one missed ritual weakens the binding significantly. Never try to communicate with the souls. They are master manipulators and will promise you anything to be released. Never leave the house empty for more than 6 days. The entity considers abandonment a breach of contract. Never try to research the entity itself. Some knowledge is too dangerous. And never, ever try to open the urns. The souls inside are not fully contained. They're compressed, concentrated evil. Opening even one would release something that could devastate an entire city. If you accept this duty, there will be a key taped under the kitchen sink in a small magnetic box. The basement door is hidden behind the bookshelf in the study. Press on the spine of Paradise Lost on the 3rd shelf from the top, and the entire bookcase will swing inward on hidden hinges. The first feeding is due on the new moon, which is in 5 days. I timed my death carefully to give you time to decide and prepare. The ritual supplies are kept in a locked cabinet in the basement chamber. The key to that cabinet is hidden inside the old music box on my bedroom dresser, the one that plays for Elise. Wind it up and let it play completely through. When the music stops, press down on the dancing ballerina figure and the bottom will open. Inside the cabinet, you'll find silver bowls for the blood, a ceremonial knife that's been blessed to cause minimal pain, vials for tears, and pouches for hair. There are also detailed instructions for the incantations and timing. I love you, child. I'm sorry this burden has fallen to you. I'm sorry I couldn't find another way. I'm sorry for all the secrets, all the lies, all the years I spent preparing you for this without you knowing. But I'm also proud of you. You're stronger than you know, braver than you realize, and more capable than you believe. If you choose to accept this responsibility, you won't be alone. Every keeper before you has left guidance in the journals hidden throughout the house. We've all faced the same struggles, the same temptations, the same despair. You'll find comfort in our shared experience. If you choose differently, I understand. I won't blame you. I'll love you regardless. But please, whatever you decide, don't take too long. The entity grows restless when there's no keeper, and restless entities do unpredictable things. With all my love and deepest regrets, Grandmother Vivian P.S. If you choose to become keeper, burn the fake will after tomorrow's reading. And whatever you do, don't let that lawyer know what you really inherited. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned and my vision blurred. Outside my apartment window, the city continued its normal rhythm, cars honking, people walking, life proceeding as if the entire universe hadn't just tilted on its axis. But as I sat there in my tiny apartment with its broken heating and peeling wallpaper, I began to remember things. Strange things that had never quite made sense before. How Grandma's house always felt different from other places. Not just old or creaky, but alive somehow. Watching, waiting. How the temperature always dropped at least 10 degrees when you entered her basement, even in summer. How she never let anyone go down there alone, always claiming the stairs were unsafe or the lighting was poor. How she'd disappear every month for an entire night, claiming she was visiting friends. But all her friends had died years ago. My mother and I had always assumed she was visiting their graves, processing her grief in private. how our family had an unusually high rate of accidents, diseases, and early deaths, but only among the older generations. My generation and my mother's had been strangely blessed. Good health, good luck, good opportunities that seemed to fall into our laps. How my mother had suffered 7 miscarriages after having me, each one more devastating than the last. The doctors could never explain it. Everything looked normal, healthy, viable. Then something would just go wrong. How my cousin Tobias had died in his sleep at age 12 with no medical explanation. One night he was fine, playing video games and complaining about homework. The next morning, he was gone. The autopsy showed nothing unusual. How every family photo older than 50 years showed relatives with the same haunted, exhausted expression Grandma always wore. A look of bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with physical age. I spent the rest of the night reading and rereading the will, cross-referencing details with family stories I remembered. Everything fit. Every unexplained death, every mysterious illness, every stroke of good fortune for those who stayed away from the house. At 3 a.m., I finally closed the laptop and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those urns. 7 bone-white containers holding compressed evil, humming with malevolent energy in a basement chamber I'd never known existed. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Grandma's house for the first time since her funeral. It looked exactly the same. Gray Victorian with peeling paint, overgrown garden, windows that seemed to watch you approach. But now I saw it differently. Not as the cozy family home where I'd spent countless Sunday afternoons, but as a prison. A beautiful, well-appointed prison that had held 3 generations of women hostage. I had the key from Grandma's purse, the one I'd used every Sunday for years to let myself in for our visits. But the house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Colder, despite the warm spring weather. More alive somehow, as if it had been waiting for me. I went straight to the study and found the bookshelf Grandma had mentioned. When I pressed on the spine of Paradise Lost, it clicked softly, and the entire bookcase swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The temperature dropped 20 degrees as I walked down those stairs. My breath came out in visible puffs. At the bottom was a heavy wooden door marked with a carved raven symbol, just like the will had described. Beyond it was a small stone chamber with 7 pedestals arranged in a perfect circle. On each pedestal sat an urn exactly like the ones in the photographs. They were humming, not audibly, but I could feel the vibration in my bones, in my teeth, in the deepest parts of my skull. 7 different frequencies creating a harmony that made my entire nervous system feel like it was being tuned like an instrument. The urns themselves were beautiful in a horrible way. Polished bone carved with intricate symbols, each one slightly different in size and shape depending on the soul contained within. As I stood there in that freezing chamber, I could swear I heard whispers. Voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize. Pleading, threatening, promising things I couldn't quite understand, but that made my skin crawl nonetheless. I ran back upstairs and called the lawyer's office, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. Mr. Whitmore, this is Delilah Blackwood. About tomorrow's will reading, I need to know something. Did you send me any documents early by mistake? Silence on the other end. Then, Miss Blackwood, I'm not sure what you mean. All documents are being held secure until tomorrow's appointment. We have very strict protocols about estate communications. Why do you ask? I received an email from your office yesterday with what appeared to be my grandmother's will. More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was sharp with concern. That's impossible. I handle all estate communications personally, and I haven't sent anything to anyone. Our system logs every email, and there's no record of any communication with your address. Can you forward me what you received immediately? My blood turned to ice. I'll bring it tomorrow. Miss Blackwood, if someone is impersonating our firm or attempting to defraud you, I hung up and raced back to my apartment. With trembling fingers, I opened my laptop and checked the email again. The sender was listed as V. Blackwood, 1847 at witchinghour.net. V. Blackwood. Vivian Blackwood. The year Cordelia made the deal. Grandma had sent me the email herself, from beyond the grave. I scrolled down to the bottom of the message and found something I'd missed before, a timestamp showing when the email had been composed. It was dated 3 weeks ago, the exact day Grandma had died. She'd written this email on her deathbed, somehow programming it to send after the lawyer received the official paperwork. She'd wanted to make sure I knew the truth before I had to choose. That evening, my mother called again. I've been thinking about Grandma's house, she said, her voice strange and distant. Maybe you shouldn't inherit it. That place always gave me the creeps. Too many bad memories. What kind of bad memories? Oh, you know, family members dying young, strange accidents, your grandfather vanishing during the war. She paused and I could hear her lighting a cigarette, a habit she'd supposedly quit years ago. Did you know Grandma's mother died at 46 and her grandmother at 38? The women in our family don't seem to live very long if they stay in that house. But Grandma lived to 71. Did she? She looked 90 by the time she died, and she never left that place. Not once in 40 years. Never traveled, never dated after Grandpa disappeared, never did anything but sit in that house and waste away. After she hung up, I spent the night researching our family genealogy online. She was right. For over a century, every woman who'd lived in that house had died before age 60. Most died between 45 and 50, their death certificates listing various causes: heart failure, stroke, cancer, mysterious illnesses the doctors couldn't explain. But their children, the ones who moved away, lived normal lifespans, good lives, successful careers, happy marriages, healthy families. The keepers aged faster. The house drained them, but it protected everyone else. The next day, I sat in Mr. Whitmore's stuffy office with my mother and cousin Lysander, listening to the fake will reading. It was exactly as Grandma had predicted. House to me, modest savings split between my mother and cousin, personal effects divided among family. Everyone seemed satisfied with the arrangements. Lysander made jokes about me finally having a place bigger than a shoebox. My mother worried about the upkeep costs and property taxes. Mr. Whitmore handed me keys and deed paperwork with a professional smile. "Your grandmother was very specific about wanting you to have the house," he said. "She felt you appreciated its history more than anyone else in the family." I signed the papers with shaking hands, knowing I was signing my life away regardless of which version of the will I chose to honor. That night, I stood in Grandma's kitchen with both wills printed out, the fake one in my left hand, the real one in my right. Outside, storm clouds gathered, and the wind howled through the old windows like something desperate to get inside. I thought about my mother, who'd been trying to have another baby for 20 years, whose miscarriages had left her hollow and broken. I thought about my cousin Lysander, who just started his surgical residency at Johns Hopkins, whose hands would save countless lives. I thought about future children who'd be born into safety and prosperity, because someone maintained the binding. I also thought about living alone in this house for the next 30 years, aging rapidly, never traveling more than an hour away, feeding blood to ancient murderers once a month while they whispered promises and threats into my dreams. I was 23. I could have a whole life ahead of me. Marriage, children, a career that meant something. I could see the world, fall in love, grow old naturally surrounded by people who cared about me, or I could protect my family like Grandma had protected me. I lit a match. The fake will caught fire first. I watched it burn in the kitchen sink until nothing remained but ash, then held the flame to the real will. At the last second, I pulled it away. I couldn't bring myself to destroy it yet. Instead, I walked to the study, pressed on the spine of Paradise Lost, and descended into the basement with my first offering. I'd stopped at the drugstore on the way over and bought a small sewing kit, a plastic cup, and a pair of nail scissors. Following the instructions in Grandma's letter, I went to her bedroom and found the music box. When I wound it up and let For Elise play through completely, pressing down on the ballerina revealed a hidden compartment containing an old brass key. In the basement chamber, the key opened a cabinet built into the stone wall. Inside were silver bowls, a ceremonial knife with an ivory handle, small glass vials, and leather pouches. Everything was clean and well-maintained, ready for immediate use. The ritual itself was simpler than I'd expected. I pricked my finger with the ceremonial knife and let 7 drops of blood fall into the silver bowl. I cut a lock of my own hair with the nail scissors and placed it in one of the leather pouches. And I cried, genuine tears of grief for Grandma, for myself, for the life I was giving up, catching them in one of the glass vials. 1 cup of blood from the living, 1 lock of hair from the willing, 1 tear from the grieving. I set the offerings on the floor in the center of the 7 urns and spoke the words Grandma had written down for me. Ancient ones, bound by bone and blood, accept this offering. Grant protection to the Blackwood line. Keep the bargain made in darkness, sealed in sorrow, paid in sacrifice. The humming stopped. For one terrifying moment, the basement was completely silent. Then a wind that couldn't exist underground swept through the chamber, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging me into absolute darkness. The silver bowl rattled against the stone floor. Something touched my face, cold fingers trailing across my cheek like a caress. A voice whispered directly into my ear, "Welcome, Keeper." When I finally found the strength to turn my flashlight back on, the bowl was empty. The hair was gone. The vial had been drained, but the urns were still there, still humming their bone-deep harmony, somehow seeming more satisfied than before. I climbed back upstairs on unsteady legs, locked the basement door, and pushed the bookshelf back into place. That was 6 months ago. I've performed the ritual 5 times now. Each month, it gets a little easier. The voices whisper to me sometimes when I'm alone in the house, but I've learned not to listen. They promise me things: freedom, power, revenge against those who wronged me. They describe the outside world in vivid detail, trying to make me homesick for a life I can never have again. But I've also felt the house's protection. The job interview that led to a promotion I didn't deserve. The car accident I walked away from without a scratch when the vehicle was completely destroyed. The test results that came back clear when the shadows on the x-rays suggested something terrible. My mother got pregnant last month, at 44, after 2 decades of trying and failing. The doctors call it a miracle. I know it's the entity keeping its end of the bargain. Lysander was accepted into the most competitive surgical program in the country, despite having average grades and no connections. Opportunities keep falling into his lap like gifts from heaven. Our entire family is thriving. But I've also noticed changes in myself. Gray hairs at 24, lines around my eyes that weren't there 6 months ago, a weariness that sleep can't cure, joint pain that has no medical explanation. When I look in the mirror now, I see the beginnings of that same haunted expression Grandma always wore. I found her journals hidden throughout the house just as she'd promised. 43 years of entries describing the slow erosion of hope, the gradual acceptance of a life lived in service to something ancient and terrible. The earliest entries are full of rage and defiance. The later ones read like resignation letters written to God. She tried to escape dozens of times in the first few years. The entity always brought her back, and the punishments grew worse each time. Physical pain, nightmares that lasted for days, visions of family members dying in horrible accidents if she didn't return immediately. Eventually, she stopped trying. Sometimes I research eclipse dates and wonder if I could gather the courage to try breaking the binding in 31 years. Other times I think about the cousin who'll inherit this responsibility when I die, and I feel guilty for even considering it. But mostly, I just take it one new moon at a time. Last week, I received another email from an address I didn't recognize. Future.keeper, 2057 on witchinghour.net. The subject line read, "Thank you." Inside was a longer message. "Dear Aunt Delilah, because of your sacrifice, I will be born. Because of your choice, I will grow up safe and protected. I know you don't know me yet, but someday you'll watch me take my first steps. Help me with homework, teach me about our family's real history. When my time comes to choose, I'll think of you and how brave you were. Thank you for giving me a chance at life." I deleted the email immediately and tried not to think about it. But sometimes, late at night when the urns are humming their lullaby in the basement below, I wonder who sent it. Some future niece or nephew, reaching back through time to thank me for a sacrifice I'm still making? Or something else entirely, wearing the face of family to keep me compliant? The entity's grandma warned about knowing too much about. I've started researching it anyway. In the town library's oldest records, I found references to something called the Marsh Walker that supposedly lived in the wetlands behind our property before they were drained and developed. The earliest settlers wrote about strange lights in the marsh, about people who went missing on foggy nights, about bargains made with things that weren't quite human. Cordelia wasn't the first to make a deal. She was just the first to make one that lasted. The other families who tried similar bargains all died out within a generation or two. Their keepers went insane, or tried to break the binding prematurely, or simply refused to continue. Only the Blackwoods have lasted over a century and a half. Maybe we're stronger than the others were. Maybe we're just more afraid. I wonder if, someday, I'll be the one sending emails to my granddaughter, trying to prepare her for the choice I made. The choice that saved our family, the choice that cost me everything, the choice I'd make again, every single time, because that's what love really means sometimes. Not grand gestures or romantic declarations, but quiet sacrifices made in basement chambers while ancient evil hums its approval. The choice to give up your own happiness so the people you care about can have theirs. The choice to become a guardian instead of living as yourself. The choice that defines not just your life, but your death, and every moment in between. I made that choice 6 months ago, and I'll keep making it every new moon for the rest of my life, however long that might be.